I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Music. It was a pleasure to talk for an hour and a half to Lou Gramm, the voice of Foreigner. He's not been with Foreigner for a few years, came back for a couple of reunions here and there, and he's really missed in the band. Now, this is our entire interview, but because it's so long, we split it into two segments. This is part one of Lou Gramm. Let me start with, I know your family was musical, but I'll skip ahead and we'll go back in a second. But when things broke for you, when things got like bombastic and big in Foreigner and everything was going on, how did your friends and how did your family react? I mean, they must have been incredibly proud.
I think stunned and proud would be more appropriate. I had no idea what success tasted like, or moving into that other league, the real big time league. I was in a band before Foreigner called Black Sheep.
Yep.
And we had 2 albums on Capitol Records, and we were touring with 10 Years After and Kiss. And we got a small taste of it, but then our truck slid off the highway and rolled over. The equipment was destroyed. That was the end of our tour and ultimately the end of our record contract with Capitol Records.
Don Mancuso, by the way, last week told me, Don Mancuso was, man, that guy speaks highly of you. Sorry to interrupt you, but he's
a good man. Good man.
I mean, talk about, you've had a lot of long-term, I mean, that says something. You don't always get that in music. You've had a lot of long-term relationships with people.
Yes, I do. When I make friends, I keep friends.
And Don mentioned, he says, Lou is loyal. Lou has he says, that's a software not everyone has, especially in this industry when money gets involved. But he said, he's a loyal man. It's a great thing to hear about someone.
Yeah, it really is. And I appreciate those comments. When after our truck crash, we were dropped by Capitol Records. We couldn't fulfill our obligation for the Kiss tour. So when that ended, then we were dropped by Capitol Records, and we were in Black Sheep was in limbo, and that's about the time I got a call from Mick, who had been playing with Leslie West, left Leslie, was in the midst of starting his own band, yet unnamed. Mick was in Rochester maybe 6 or 8 months earlier with Spooky Tooth.
Were you familiar with them, by the way? At that time, you must have known Spooky Tooth, eh?
I was a big Spooky Tooth fan. They were great, and so we got backstage to meet them, and I gave Mick the 2 Black Sheep albums. I says, you can give those a listen at your leisure. So apparently he did, because when he began forming this yet unnamed band, he remembered hearing my voice on those records and ended up calling my parents and asking them if they could get in touch with me and if I could call him back. So I did, and he said, would you like to come to New York and audition for this new band I'm putting together? And while it sounded very intriguing, I said, you know what, Mick, I says, I appreciate the offer. I says, but I'm in a band. I says, I'm in a very good band. We just had a run of bad luck. And I told him what happened. And he said, oh, that's really bad, He says, well, listen, he goes, I know you're going to see if you could put things back together. I'll call you back in about 3 weeks and we'll talk again. So in the meantime, I told the guys from Black Sheep who called and wanted me to audition. And they said, what are you, crazy? Go to New York. See what you can do, So when Mick called back, I says, yeah, I'm ready to come and audition.
When Dawn told me that, I remember going, it's kind of like a Linda Ronstadt Eagles story when she said to them, and that's, I always say hard times makes good people. When you see that situation, but your chance is bigger than what was going on there. They saw it. And by the way, Paying Your Dues sounds like a Foreigner song. I remember, I think it does. I listen to that. I listen to your voice. I'm going, when Mick heard that, I'm sure I'm not going to put words in Mick Jones' situation, but Paying Your Dues to me, I'm going, that sounds like early Foreigner to me.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? That's
great driving song.
So I flew to New York. He sent me a ticket, and I stayed at a hotel, and right around the corner from where the band rehearsed, I auditioned. They liked my voice. they didn't tell me I was in, but Mick asked me if I could stay for a few days. I went down there with a satchel. I had 2 T-shirts, 2 pairs of underwear, and 2 pairs of socks. And that was it. So I stayed there over a week. And at night I'd come back to my hotel and I'd hand wash my clothes and hang them. You know, so I'd have clean clothes to wear the next day.
Yeah.
And finally I told him, look, I says, I came down here expecting to stay a day or two. I says, I've been here over a week. I said, I have no clothes. I says, I've got to go home. If you want me to come back and participate, I says, I'm more than willing. I said, I haven't even been told if I'm in yet. And he goes, oh yeah, you're in, you know? So then I started getting a stipend from management, from Foreigner's management. So I could fly home, and they didn't give me a lot of money, but they gave me enough money to put my furniture in a trailer. I had a young girl with me who I've been living with for 3 years already. So we all went down, and we couldn't stay in New York City. You couldn't afford to stay in New York City at that time, and now either. So we were about 45 minutes north of New York in a place called Croton on Hudson. It was right on the Hudson River. And there was a train line that went direct from the Croton station right to Grand Central Station. So we got a place for about $125 a month, which was at the top of our rent level at that point. And we moved in with the little furniture we had, and we started shopping at secondhand stores for a little more furniture and this and that. And we called that home for over a year. And I was either taking a train or driving into Manhattan every time the band rehearsed.
I noticed a picture behind you, that famous appearance in '64 in the Ed Sullivan Show. But I heard you in another interview saying, so Mick knew some of the Beatles?
Yeah, in 1961 or 62, when the Beatles were playing in Munich and Hamburg.
Yeah.
He was playing with the French Elvis. His name escapes me now, but he was very popular. Johnny Holiday. And they crossed paths a bunch of times, and the Beatles were so surprised to see an English guy in with a French band that they asked him to jam on stage. And after the show, they all hung out all night and stuff like. He was one of them for over a week. He says it felt like I was one of them. That's
insane.
Yes.
I mean, there's is this your place or is this Bob's place that you're at?
This is my place.
Okay, so that is your picture, and
yes, it is. I have a number of pictures like that.
Is that right? Did you ever?
I have pictures with the Beatles laying on the canvas and Muhammad Ali standing over them like this.
When your parents, coming from a musical family, and I've got a drummer. I was a drummer, but my son's a way better drummer than me, which is usually what happens. And I know your brother played the drums after you, and he was really, really good. Drumming's an interesting instrument. A lot of people start with it. I mean, I just talked to Bobby Rydell a little while before he died. He was a drummer first, and Sinatra's a drummer.
When did he die? When did he pass?
Lou, I think maybe a month ago. I think about a month ago, maybe 2 months.
I didn't even read about it. There was no headlines about it at all.
No. And I mean, that's right in your wheelhouse.
I liked him.
Nice guy, but he had a similar story to you in the way that, and you hate to tell somebody you should be dead, but Bobby had 2 transplants from, in his case, for him, and I read his book. He had a major drinking problem and he's very transparent about it, but he always says I should be dead, and he said I'm lucky to be here. I pray, and you were in a very similar situation, ex-drummer.
Yes, it was.
And you like the traditional guys too, right? I mean, from your family, you were listening to a big band and a lot of those artists.
I was brought up on big band and Sinatra and Tony Bennett and Ella Fitzgerald and Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie, all of those. And I grew to love them,
When you left home, for instance, I'm curious, on that stage when you left home, what was in your record collection when you said to mom and dad, okay, I'm going? What were you listening to at that point?
Well, it was a cross section of Beatles, of what I liked out of the popular era that we were living in, and I had a couple jazz records too.
See, I'm not surprised by that because there's so much. There's like swing in your phrasing's always been amazing, and the little nuances you put in. You know, some people call them ticks. I call them brilliance. Did you get that from those guys, or was that something that spontaneously came out of you?
I think it's a mix of spontaneity and what I absorbed from those old singers, you know.
Yeah. By the way,
and the old rock singers like Bobby Rydell and Dion. I was a huge Dion fan. He was a great singer.
Yeah. In the beginning, I remember when I got into radio, I was pronouncing your name wrong. I mean, I know it's Lou Gramm now because I mean you're one of the most famous singers out there. But did you have people pronouncing your name wrong in the beginning? Because
well, when I was in Black Sheep, I was still grammatico, and they were pronouncing it grammatico and germatico, and they were butchering it. So when I got in Foreigner, just before we got our signing with Atlantic Records, Bud Prager, Foreigner's manager, called me back in his office and he sat me down. He says, I don't think this is a problem, but I want to run it by you. He says, you've got a very ethnic and difficult to pronounce last name. He says, you're going to find out that when people who are interviewing you or who introduce you, they're going to butcher your name, and you're gonna bristle at that, and it's going to start the interview off on a bad note. He says, if I were you and you could take this or leave it, he says, I would shorten it to Gramm, G-R-A-M. He said, and avoid all of that mispronunciation and getting off on the wrong foot and you having to correct them before the interview even starts. He says, shorten it to Gramm, and he says, and leave your last name the way it is for business purposes. He says, but for performance and for the stage persona, he says, I would change it. So I didn't do G-R-A-M, I did G-R-A-M-M, which my full last name has two M's.
How'd your parents react?
They weren't thrilled about it, but when I told them the reason why, they understood.
Well, Mike Reno.
Right.
When you were sitting there, Mick told you when you were auditioning or playing with them for the first time to also write and then sing what you wrote?
Not really. No, he didn't say that. He after I auditioned, I was singing songs that were already written.
Right.
But like when I went there, I sang "Feels Like the First Time." That was completely written already. And I think "At War with the Worlds" or something else. I think I did 2 or 3 songs that were complete already. However, when he knew he liked my voice and he asked me if I would like to be part of the band, then he asked me. He says, "Do you write?" And I says, "Did you hear those Black Sheep albums?" And he says, "Yes." I says, "I wrote a huge part of that repertoire." And he says, "Fine." He says, "We're going to start writing right away." And the day that I was accepted in, that evening, I went over to Mick's house for dinner. And after dinner, we worked on, trying to think what song it was, "Long, Long Way from Home."
Yeah. For
about 6 hours until 1 o'clock. And then I went back to my hotel room.
That is a great song. I love that song.
Thank you.
I
left the small town, Rochester, for the Apple and Decay. And the Apple and Decay was New York, because when I was down there, there was a garbage strike. The garbage hadn't been picked up in over 3 weeks. It was all piled up on the curb. All of Manhattan stunk to high heaven. And that I termed the Apple in Decay.
That's a great line. And that song has a nice bounce to it too. I love the way that you grab your words when you're writing. Do you ever sing it or?
Oh yeah, I have to sing it.
By the way, was this ever a picture? Was this ever like did they paint? Was this ever did someone take a picture or did someone just draw it?
I think the picture was taken, and it was decided that it needed a little more life to it. So we had someone characterize it.
Right.
And I like the way it turned out.
Songwriters Hall of Fame, that must mean a lot to you.
I didn't even see that coming. When I got a congratulations letter from them, I had only briefly heard about them, but apparently they've been going on a long time. And their first inductee was Francis Scott Key.
I don't know who that is. Sorry.
He wrote the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, wow. Okay, I know that.
But they didn't induct him back then. He was obviously, I think the Songwriters Hall of Fame has been around about 20 years or something like that. But I heard that he was their first inductee because of that song.
When you sang "Feels Like the First Time," when you went in and you were singing that song, did you know that was a hit? Did you get a feeling like, wow, this is
Yes. Yeah, Mick and I both felt it was a hit, and I had nothing to do with it, but I just knew it was a hit. If Atlantic decided that would be a single, because after all our songs were written, we had our favorites that we thought would be big, but everything had to go through Atlantic, and they had their own choices,
Well, going into the first album, you learn, and I've heard the stories about, I Want to Know What Love Is. We'll get to that in a second. Like, I can't believe that story, but I mean, I believe it, but I can't believe it, but we'll get to it in a second.
I don't believe it today.
I don't blame you. But when you're going there, the atmosphere is the first album, there's like 6 guys there. What did you learn real quick going into that first album? Is there things, because everyone has it, every band's a system, and every band when you auditioned or when you joined, were the other 5 guys in the band already?
Yes, but there were a couple changes after I got in.
Right. So what was the atmosphere like going in there when you're laying down the first album? It's the first album. So you've already been on 2 albums and you've done a lot of work at that point. What was it like for you?
Well, because it was a whole new setting, a whole new background, and because I was auditioning in a studio, I was singing to the tracks that were already recorded. The 2 or 3 songs that I sang to were already recorded, and they just had no vocals on them. So they sent me out into the live room with a recording mic, and they were playing me the song, and I was singing. And they were in the control room listening to me. It wasn't that they had to play along and concentrate on what they were doing. They were done. They were just listening to me.
Wow.
Yep.
Your first co-write on the radio with the band, Cold as Ice. Tell me that again, I hate to give you a cliche question, but did you know that this, I mean, I remember in high school, everyone sang that song. We loved that song.
Yep. I mean, we didn't know. We knew that it was infectious.
Yeah.
And that it had a certain something that was endearing about it. And it was rocky, but it was poppy too.
Yeah.
And that's just what we needed, really. And we had high hopes for it, and it did not disappoint.
Between the first and the second album, that you've got something, it could be big. Because, I mean, you never know with the second album, right? I mean, you guys certainly did not suffer the sophomore jinx because...
That's true. But so many bands did,
Yeah.
There were bands who had great first albums, and you never heard of them after that anymore.
Well, you went 5 times platinum with the first one in 77, and then Double Vision is 7 times platinum. Not only did you beat the sophomore jinx, you blew it out of the water.
Yes, we did.
But going into the second one, before you started recording it, what were you, as a young man, what were you thinking? You were thinking this was you were set. How were you thinking?
Well, I was very aware of the sophomore jinx, and I was aggressive about not falling prey to that. But I was nervous too. I was worried, but when I started hearing the idea, when Mick started playing, like I said, I'd go to his apartment, we'd have dinner, he'd play me some ideas, and he'd let me pick an idea, and we'd start working on it. If he had a favorite, he'd play that for me. He says, I really think this could be something. Let's work on this. And
Did
we
he ever do? Did he ever do a guide vocal thing where? Because I know he sang, but he wasn't you, obviously.
Usually, if he presented me a new idea, it was the guitar, and there was a little soft vocal in there, just to give me his idea of what he liked the melody and the phrasing to be, you know. And sometimes we would stick to that, and sometimes we would start there and end up someplace else.
Double Vision. How did that start off? I remember my reaction to Double Vision. First of all, as an album title, but as a song, I remember thinking, I don't know why I thought this. I'm going, I never would have thought of calling a song Double Vision, but man, that's because it sparks curiosity right off the bat. Tell me about that one.
Well, we were working on the music for the song Double Vision, and I was just scatting melodies over. I had no lyrics, and it was the NHL hockey playoffs. And in my vocal booth, I had a little tiny TV taped to the wall. No volume, obviously. You didn't want anything to bleed into my mic, but I could see the visual of it. And every time we'd take a 2-minute break, I turned the volume up a little bit. And it was my team, the New York Rangers, and I think they were playing Montreal Canadiens, you know, and John Davidson was the goalie for New York, and while I was watching it, one of the Montreal guys, they weren't even playing, it was a timeout. One of the Montreal guys skated in front of him and whacked him with the back of the stick, and he went down like a ton of bricks, knocked out cold. Okay, and then there was a big fight between the two teams. And meanwhile, the trainers and the coaches and a couple of players helped John up to his skates, but he was really gone. And they basically walked him, skated him over to the sidelines, and then he went in the back room, and the second string goalie came out and played. But after that, they would give reports that John was feeling a little better. He's still dizzy, and he's experiencing
Double Vision.
And I heard when he said that, I go, that's it, you know. And suddenly I fill my eyes with these Double Vision.
That is crazy. See, yes. I knew there was a good story behind that. Dirty White Boy, was that about somebody?
It was nobody I knew. It was just a conglomeration of people like that I had met, you know?
Yeah. I remember of all the songs you guys have, that's the one I play the loudest, by the way. It's just the way it goes.
I'm not sure if you know, but that song and that album was met with a lot of disdain.
Really? Why?
In the Northeastern radio stations and in the Midwest, it was considered an obscene album cover to see a young girl in a boy's bathroom wiping her number off the wall, you know, and by the look on her face, her look is like this, like somebody caught her, you know.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah.
And then Dirty White Boy, somehow, you know, it's about a rough and tough guy and all that stuff. But the Dirty White Boy was somehow deemed racial. It had nothing to do with race. Nothing. It was about a tough kid, a dirty white boy, you know. And so it was banned at the big Boston, I can't remember what station, a big Boston station, and a number of stations throughout the Midwest, and there were album burnings. There were bonfires with not just the Head Games album, but if they were offended by the Head Games, they burned all the Foreigner albums. It was insane.
Well, that's, you know, as they say,
over nothing.
Yeah. When 4 came out, the band got smaller. Someone had asked me to ask you. He said that you regretted that happened.
I regretted it for the friendships that we had.
Yeah.
But I not only agreed, but I kind of pushed for it to happen musically. The first three albums were fine, but I was seeing a sameness in people's playing. No matter what song we were writing or recording, it was almost like they were playing the same similar parts all the time, same similar sound. There was nothing creative or nothing that made us go, wow, that's great. They were just kind of like noodling, and it wasn't helping the band get any better. It was just not a good feeling,
Well, it went 6 times platinum and had 5 singles.
Oh no, I understand all that, and so did Mick. And he felt the same way. We were at a point after Head Games where we needed a big album, a creatively different album in a different direction, and we started writing songs for it. And these particular guys were into it, but they were playing the same stuff they played 2 albums ago. Just noodling, same sounds, same kind of. They weren't. We were growing, and we needed to grow, and they were not growing. They were actually holding us back.
Jukebox Hero got stars in his eyes. I mean, there's so many great songs, that being one of them, about the dream of what could be, because every kid, whether they play an instrument or not, wants to be a rock star. That's part of everybody. Tell me about that one.
I was in the basement of my first home that I bought, and I had a set of drums set up there, and I had a TX 4-track tape recorder, reel to reel, down there. And I started with that beat, and the half talking, half singing, standing in the rain, and I don't know what words I was singing, but I eventually honed it down to that, and I got it to the point where it was take one guitar smash, and at that point I hit a creative brick wall. So I called Mick and I says, I think you're going to like this, Mick. Can I come over and play you something? And he says, yeah. So I went over there, and the way it started and the way I started singing and stuff, I was watching him, and I could see that he felt what I was feeling, and by the time my idea hit a brick wall, he had his guitar in his hands and picked up where I left off. And when we gotta keep it rocking, and then we worked together on that big chorus. And we, even on a little cassette player or whatever, we put down the idea. We were jumping up and down or hugging each other, and we knew that whether it was accepted or loved or ignored as a song, that the song was we thought of the highest level and had a message that every kid could identify with.
Yeah. And it had a unique sound for Foreigner at that time.
Very unique.
Made you stare at the speakers. One of those songs when, especially what you did in the beginning, I remember going, what? It makes you look.
Doom, 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 right?
Yeah. Hey, by the way, Bob was telling me I had a 73 Camaro for my first car with a vinyl roof, and I had a 78 Trans Am with a funky chicken on the hood. But before you tell me about current cars, what's the first splurging thing you did as a member of Foreigner? Or was it cars?
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
With the first album, I banked money and I worked on my house. And I worked on the garage, so I can house a couple cars. With the first royalty check from Double Vision, I went to Manhattan Porsche Audi and ordered a 930 turbo Porsche.
Law!
Petrol blue with black interior. It was a stunning, beautiful, incredibly fast car, and I had it for 19 years.
Wow.
And At the end of 19 years, I had 6,000 miles on it.
It was a Sunday car.
We were touring so much in the summer that I could barely ever use. When I come home for a day or two, I take it out for a little spin and put it back in the garage. But there was never a time when I could drive it every day for 2 or 3 weeks and really feel like I was at one with the car. Never was able to do that because we were so damn busy. I mean, I'm talking about all the albums and tours took up for 8-10 months, sometimes a year and a half of our time. And when we were done with that, it was right back writing songs for the next album. So that car had 6,000 miles on it after 19 years. And at that point, my wife and I, our kids barely knew their grandparents and their aunts and uncles. We decided we would still be part of Foreigner, but it was time to move back home to Rochester. So when I moved home to Rochester, obviously the Porsche went with me. The roads in Rochester had so many potholes and stuff in it that I was afraid I was going to bend the frame on that Porsche. I couldn't enjoy driving it because I was always dodging potholes and huge bumps and stuff like that. So I said, I'm going to ruin this car if I keep driving it here. So I sold it. I auctioned it. I put it up on an auction.
Did you get with a car like that gets a lot of attention, and you being one of the biggest rock stars out there at the time, you must have got? Did people come up to you? Because you had a very distinct look.
I wasn't there for the auction.
But in general.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And in that 19 years with that Porsche, did you get other cars at the same time, or did you not have time?
I had a couple other cars. I had a 1968 Camaro Super Sport Rally Sport.
Oh my God.
Red with a black top and the black stripes. It was beautiful. And I also ended up with a 1973 442 455 4-speed. That was beautiful too. It was a dark cinnamon color with cream interior. Beautiful car.
How many speeding tickets did you get, Lou Gramm?
I got a few.
Oh, by the way, what do you have now? You still have sports cars now?
Yes, I have. I think I have five or six. I have a '68 Camaro Super Sport, black on black, with less than 20,000 miles.
Oh my God!
I have a '67 Chevelle Super Sport, yellow with a black top, 396, 375 horse. That's got about 15,000 original miles. I've got a 1965 GTO. I've got about five cars, and they're all meticulous. You know, if they are meticulous when I buy them, they're meticulous as soon as I have them.
Right. Hope you enjoyed that. That was part one of our entire interview with Lou Gramm, one of the greatest voices in rock and roll history, where we talk about, a lot of the hits that he was involved with. In a couple of days, you'll be able to hear part two. Remember, if you want to support rock history music and Rock History Book, there's a way you can do that. At the very top of the description, we now have a link to PayPal where you can help us out if you'd like, if you can. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Music. More from the entire interview of Lou Gramm in just a few days.